Hey, it's me, Jenny Lee. I'm here with the next raw discussion video. We're on session 36. That makes this video number 37. Let's see what we have in store for us today. Right. Don asks, would you please give us a definition of the mind-body-spirit complex totality? So if you watched the last one, you saw this phrase come up, and I mentioned that it was getting ready to be explained. It might have been talked about before at some point, but it wasn't part of my awareness yet because I hadn't read this section. So here we go. There is a dimension in which time does not sway. In this dimension, the mind, body, spirit, in its eternal dance of the present, may be seen in totality. And before the mind, body, spirit complex, which then becomes part of the social memory complex, is willingly absorbed into the allness of the one creator, the entity knows itself in totality. Okay, so this is already confusing, and it's going to get even more confusing as we go along. I think that it might be in this session, but might also be in the next session. Stuff gets really confusing. So might need some assistance here. Okay, this mind-body-spirit complex totality functions as a resource for what you would perhaps call the higher self. Oh no, it's definitely this one. Okay, so this is going to get really confusing, and I've always been confused about higher self, and sometimes I feel like I start to understand it and then my mind just cannot grasp. So put your thinking caps on, people. This one's going to take some thought process. Some major higher thinking, outside the box stuff here. Okay, the mind, body, spirit complex totality functions as a resource for the higher self. The higher self, in turn, is a resource for examining the distillations of the third density experience and programming further experience. This is also true of densities of 4th, 5th, and 6th, with the mind-body-spirit complex totality coming into consciousness in the course of 7th density. My brain's hurting already. And I've already read this before. It does not get any easier to understand. Okay, so higher self, I just don't even know. I don't even know how to explain any of this stuff. Okay, so the mind-body-spirit complex totality offers functions as a resource, so as a holding of all the information for the higher self. And then the higher self is a resource, a holding of all the information for examining the distillations of third density experiences. So, you know, the one we're having right now, and all the ones we've had before, and all the ones we're going to have ahead of us in third density, so that we can figure out what to do next. But this also happens in 4th, 5th, and 6th, with the mind, body, spirit complex totality coming into its own consciousness only in the 7th density. So even for raw, they're only 4th density. So they're having to use this process too. Whatever this process is. Let's read some more about it. Don says, then would the mind-body-spirit complex totality be responsible for programming changes and catalysts during the third density experience so that the proper catalyst would be added as conditions change during the third density experience? So giving us different lessons to learn, basically. Incorrect. The higher self, which is the self which exists with full understanding of the accumulation of experiences of the entity aids the entity in achieving healing of the experiences which have not been learned properly, and assists in further life experience programming. Okay. So, making distinctions between these different terms. Mind, body, spirit, complex, totality is something different than higher self. Higher self has a full understanding of all the lives that have existed for the soul of a specific self. And then it aids in achieving the healing of experiences which they have not learned correctly, and helps figure out new lessons so that they can learn them, hopefully. Further life experience programming. That's the higher self. Okay. The mind, body, spirit, complex totality is that which may be called upon by the higher self aspect, just as the mind, body, spirit complex calls upon the higher self. So it's like an even higher, I don't know what the right word is. It's higher up the chain. In the one case, you have a structured situation within the space-time continuum, with the higher self having available to it the totality of experiences which have been collected by an entity, and a very firm grasp of the lessons to be learned in the density. Okay. The mind-body-spirit complex totality is as the shifting sands, and is in some part a collection of parallel developments of the same entity. Okay, here we're getting into some craziness. This information is made available to the higher self aspect. This aspect may then use these projected possibility vortices in order to better aid in what you would call future life programming. So let's back up for a second, because I wrote some notes here. Okay, so here's what I'm trying to, this is what I'm trying to understand here, is what I think is happening. The mind, body, spirit complex is our current experience. Our higher self, which I just realized I forgot the H in there, it says Hager. Higher self has access. What did I even write? I can't even read my handwriting. Okay, hold on. Mind, body, spirit complex equals current experience. The mind, body, spirit complex totality is all experiences. The higher self has access to both and works as the programmer for new experiences. But this is also not just all experiences, it's all possible experiences. That's what Rod just said on the next part. So hopefully that is helpful to understand what the heck they're talking about. I still don't know if I completely understand it. Okay, out of this is Don's question. Out of the Seth material, Seth says that each entity here on Earth is one aspect or part of a higher self or oversoul, which has many aspects or parts in many dimensions, all of which learn lessons which enable the higher self to progress in a balanced manner. Is it correct that there are possibly many experiences similar to the one that we experience here in the third density that are governed by a single higher self? So let's talk about who Seth is. So the Seth material was a channeler, her name was Jane Roberts, from 1963 to 1964. And and they end up writing a channeled text, much like the one we're reading now, but from an entity named Seth. And that is the extent of which I know about that. Now, I've heard people talk about it, but I've never read it myself. I know that the Jane Roberts lady is really kind of scary looking. I hate to say that about somebody, but she is. So when you see the book covers, it's a little off-putting. But yeah, I'm sure some of you guys might have read the Seth material. So if you got anything to say about it, put it in the comments. All right, let's continue. Ross says the correctness of this statement is variable. The more in balance an entity becomes, the less possibility probability vortices may need to be explored in parallel experiences. Okay, so first of all, Ra has twice now said that there's parallel experiences. Does that mean that we have parallel dimensions where we're living different lives? I mean, this is a concept and a theory that people have been talking about for a long time. And it's saying, and I'm getting like really weird chills right now. Okay. Calm down. All right, let's back up a little bit here. The mind-body-spirit complex totality is as the shifting sands, a collection of parallel developments of the same entity. So is this like being able to change timelines? Or is this like literally parallel dimensions where we're existing in different lives? There's no answer to this question. This aspect may then use, the information is available to the higher self, and the aspect is then used to use these projected possibility vortices in order to better aid in what you would call future programming. And then it says, the more balanced an entity becomes, the less they need the probability vortices and these parallel experiences. Like, I get it, but I don't get it. I understand I understand the dynamics of what they're talking about, but I don't understand what they mean by parallel experiences. Let's keep going. You can see I wrote, huh? Okay, Dawn asks, do I understand from this then that the higher self may break down into numerous units if the experience is required to simultaneously experience different types of catalysts and then oversee these experiences? That's an excellent question, Dawn. However, the answer Ra gives is this. This is a statement we cannot say to be correct or incorrect due to the confusions of what you call time. Stupid time. We can't understand what time is, or what it isn't, or that it exists or that it doesn't exist. Like, we're just a mess. And because we can't understand time, we can't understand what the heck they're talking about. Oh, good God. Okay, true simultaneity is available only when all things are seen to be occurring at once. This overshadows the concept of which you speak. The concept of various parts of the being living experiences of varying natures simultaneously is not precisely accurate due to your understanding that this would indicate that this was occurring with true simultaneity, and that is not the case. The case is from universe to universe. Oh, God. And parallel existences can then be programmed by the higher self given the information available from the mind-body-spirit complex totality regarding the possibility vortices at any crux. There's, see my little question mark? What in hell? Like literally, what in the heckin' heck are they talking about? So, all right. Trying to get my brain to work. Did I finish my coffee yet? Not quite. Okay, so a parallel dimension would make it seem like we're living simultaneously. Like there's multiple of me in these different dimensions, and we're all living our lives slightly differently. And Bra is saying that that's not the case because it's not happening truly simultaneously, whatever that means. But the cases from universe to universe and parallel existences can be programmed by the higher self, given the information available from the mind-body-spirit complex totality regarding the probability possibility vortices. So we need some definitions here. What is a parallel existence and what's universe to universe? Because when I'm thinking about like different universes, I'm thinking about literally different, like completely different universes where there's different stuff. There wouldn't be one of me somewhere else in a different universe. However, that's not what this is indicating. It's indicating that there's a different universe where the higher self has the opportunity to program a parallel existence to see what the probability or possibility would be of a different lesson, is what it sounds like. So does that mean that like there's not really, we're not really existing in that other universe, but like it's almost like a simulation? Like a computer would run a whole bunch of simulations to see what the potential outcomes would be? Or what? Can you give me an example of an entity, possibly one from our historical past, possibly an entity that you might choose if you don't wish to name one, and give an example of how this type of programming by the higher self would then bring about the education through parallel existences? Please. Perhaps the simplest example of this apparent simultaneity of existence is of two selves, which are in truth one self at the same time-space, or higher self seems to exist simultaneously, the mind-body-spirit complex which it aids. I might have to come back to that sentence. This is not actually simultaneous, for the higher self is moving to the mind-body-spirit complex as needed from a position in development of the entity which would be considered in the future of this entity. This one is really hurting my brain cells. We're working our brain muscles today. Deep breaths. Let's go back over this paragraph. This might end up being a long one because this session is pretty long and we haven't barely scratched the surface. Okay. This is the simplest example, by the way, Ross says. Simplest example of simultaneity of existence of two selves, which is not really two selves because it's one self at the same time and space. The higher self seems to exist simultaneously with the mind-body-spirit complex which it aids. Okay, we got that. Like, right, if you know anything about higher selves, you realize that as right now, as we sit here and I'm making this video and you're watching this video, we are the mind body spirit complex, and what's in what we are perceiving as our current existence. Here we are, mind body spirit complex. This is us. But somewhere up there, there's a higher self that's connected to us that helps us move through our existence, that helps us try to learn specific lessons that we had previously programmed, and can kind of manipulate our path, trying to get us to learn stuff, whether we do or not, is our free will. I got that. I hope that you also got that. But then but then it says this is not actually simultaneous, for the higher self is moving to the mind body spirit complex as needed from a position in development of the entity which would be considered in the future of the entity. Okay, so the higher self can literally come down and be part of our mind body spirit complex. It can come down from wherever it is and actually be part of us to help us move in the development of what the possible future is. I think I'm starting to understand that. I still do not understand this parallel existence thing. So let's see what else comes about here. Dawn says, then the higher self operates from the future. In other words, my higher self would operate from what I consider to be my future. Is this correct? From the standpoint of your space-time, this is correct. Whoa. And now we've thrown in a whole nother mess. We've thrown in a whole nother wrench into this whole thing. We hadn't even understood the parallel existences yet, and now they're talking about living in the future. Our higher self operates from the future. But wait, there's more, and it only gets more confusing. Don asks, in that case, my higher self would have a very large advantage in knowing precisely what is needed, since it would know what was going to happen, correct? No. No, incorrect. In that it would be an abrogation of free will. The higher self aspect is aware of the lessons learned through the sixth density. Okay, so now stuff's getting even more confusing. And at this point, I just want to close the book and be like, hey guys, see you later. Because this is like making my chest hurt. Okay. The higher self is aware of lessons learned through the sixth density, suggesting that we've all moved up that far already. But then why would we be here? If there's some part of us that exists in the sixth and seventh density already, why the hell are we here? Why the hell are we existing in this third density? Hell. What? Okay, I'm getting angry. Let's calm down. The progress rate is fairly well understood. The choices which must be made to achieve the higher self are in the provenance of the mind-body-spirit complex itself. I don't know what any of that means. Thus, the higher self is like the map in which the destination is known, and the roads are very well known. These roads being designed by intelligent infinity working through intelligent energy. However, the higher self aspect can program only for the lessons and certain predispositioning limits if it wishes. The remainder is completely the free choice of each entity. There is the perfect balance between the known and the unknown. Are you all feeling as confused and irritated as I am at this point? And I really do just think it's like we're not going to be able to understand this stuff because we don't understand time. So let's back up here. Okay. Don's like, higher self knows what's going to happen. So why can't we why it would be real easy to program the stuff that we need to know, right? No, because it messes up with free will. The higher self is aware of lessons learned through the sixth density. The word is learned with an ED, as in it has already happened. It's past tense. It has occurred already. And maybe that's not accurate. Maybe it's an error in what Ra wanted to say. I don't know. Maybe it's supposed to mean possible lessons through the sixth density. But the word that's used is learned, as in past tense. But the choices which must be made to achieve the higher self takes place in the mind-body-spirit complex. But the higher self is the map. You know where you're going, and you know what roads need to be taken to get there, because they're designed by the intelligent infinity working through intelligent energy. The higher self can only program lessons through certain predispositioned limitations. And the rest of it is the free will of the mind-body-spirit complex, us. There's a perfect balance between known and unknown. Okay, Don says, I'm sorry for having so much trouble with these concepts, but they're pretty difficult to translate, and I'm sure in our understanding and language, and some of my questions may be rather ridiculous, but does the higher self have a physical vehicle or some type of vehicle like our physical vehicle? Does it have a bodily complex? Preach it, Don. This stuff is so confusing. What are they even talking about? Okay. Remember the question was, does the higher self have a body complex? Correct. The higher self is of a certain advancement within sixth density going into seventh. After the seventh has been well entered, the mind-body-spirit complex becomes so totally a mind-body-spirit complex totality that it begins to gather spiritual mass and approaches the octave density. Thus, the looking backwards is finished at that point. Okay, so the higher self is of a certain advancement within sixth density. So our higher self is in the sixth density. Remember, the sixth density is the combination of love and wisdom. They're working through putting the information they learned in fourth density with love and the information they learned in fifth density with wisdom, and they're working together. And then after the seventh density, they become so total that they're a totality, and then they don't need to look backwards anymore. Once again, suggesting that they've already moved through everything. Is the higher self of every entity of a sixth density nature? Correct. It is the honor duty of self to self as one approaches seventh density. I'm not getting this at all. I really am not. And if somebody that's watching this is getting this, can you please try to explain it to me in a way that is like not going to make my brain hurt? How in the hell can there be a sixth density entity that's us existing at the same time as a totality in the seventh density, at the same time that we're in a third density mind body spirit complex, but we're all the same thing? Am I just missing something really simple, like the fact that we're all one? The law of one. We're all one. And if we're all one, then we all exist everywhere, all at the same time, through all space and time, because there's no time. Is that what I'm missing? Because if that's the answer, that's pretty simple. But they spend so much time in this book trying to explain the individualness and the fact that each individual entity has free will. That it makes us still think about us being as this individual entity. But if there's a part of us that exists in the sixth density and the seventh density, this whole time I've been doing this, my whole body is getting chills. So I feel like maybe I'm learning something and I don't realize that I'm learning something. Maybe things are clicking better than I think they're clicking. I don't know. I'm just going to keep talking myself through it. But the thing that I keep getting stuck on is if we have a part of us that's in the sixth density and the seventh density, it suggests that we've already done all of this. It suggests that we already did all of it, because how else would we have gotten to the sixth and seventh density? To get to the fourth, like in the fourth density, we're a social memory complex of like all the beings from a planet. And then they move up to the fifth density, where they start learning about wisdom. And then they move up to the sixth density, which is wisdom and love, and that's where our higher self exists. Or is there parts? Okay, hold on. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning. Everything was one, right? And then it starts expanding outward, outward, outward. But what if there's parts of us? What if there's parts of it that didn't keep going, that stayed in those specific densities? That would make more sense to me. That there's some part of me that's, because we all started in the eighth density as one energy, and then it starts moving outward, outward, outward. But if some part of us stayed in the seventh and some part of us stayed in the sixth, then that makes more sense than it going all the way out to first and then coming back. But then we're also existing at the same time. I don't know. Maybe I just made things more complicated. Let's keep reading this book. We're already at 34 minutes. Okay. Dawn says, well, let me be sure I understand this then. Good luck, Dawn. We have spoken of certain particular individuals. For instance, we were speaking of George Patton in a previous communication. Then his higher self, at the time of his incarnation as George Patton about 40 years ago, his higher self was in the sixth density. At that time in the sixth density, correct? Correct. We make some note at this time that each entity has several beings upon which to call for inner support. Any of these may be taken by an entity to be the mind-body-spirit complex totality. However, this is not the case. This is not the case. What? Okay. We all have several beings that we can call upon for support. I got that. That's like spirit guides, right? Any of these may be taken by an entity to be the mind-body-spirit complex totality, but it's not the case. So we might interpret them as being the mind-body-spirit complex, but they're not. The mind-body-spirit complex totality is a nebulous connection of all that may occur, held in understanding. A collection of all that may occur, not that it has occurred, may occur, held in understanding. The higher self itself is a projection or manifestation of the mind-body-spirit complex totality. Okay, we're getting somewhere now. It's a projection of the totality, which then may communicate with the mind-body-spirit, us, during the disincarnate part of a cycle of rebirth. So when our mind-body-spirit complex spirit is in between lives, or during the incarnation, may communicate if the proper pathways or channels through the roots of the mind are open. All right, maybe we're getting somewhere here now. Maybe we're getting somewhere here, and maybe there was no reason for me to flip out about everything. This paragraph seems like I can maybe understand this better. The mind-body-spirit complex totality is a collection of all that may occur, is held in understanding. The higher self is a projection of that collection of information. It's a manifestation of the mind-body-spirit complex totality, which is really just a collection of information. And it can communicate with the mind-body-spirit, our soul, when we're in between lives, or when we're incarnated in a body, like right now, if the proper channels and pathways through the roots of the mind are opened. So if we're available and open to the information, the mind-body-spirit complex totality and higher self can actually communicate with us while we're here. Here. Okay. So one more time. Mind-body-spirit complex totality is a collection of information of what might happen for an entity. The higher self is a projection of that collection of information. And then they can communicate with us in between lives or when we're incarnated, if we're open. Okay. Don says these channels would then be opened by meditation, and I'm assuming the intense polarization would help this, correct? Partly correct. Intense polarization does not necessarily develop in the mind-body-spirit complex, the will or need to contact the oversoul. Each path of life experience is unique. However, given the polarization, the will is greatly enhanced and vice versa. So it's really about the will or need to want to contact the higher self. But that's not necessary for the development of the polarization, is what it sounds like. But it's greatly enhanced both ways. All right, let me take as an example the one you call Himmler. Remember Heinrich Himmler, the very, very nasty, awful person from, orchestrated the Holocaust. We are assuming from this that his higher self was of 6th density, and it was stated that Himmler had selected the negative path. Would his higher self then dwell in the 6th density negative type of situation? Could you expand on this concept? All right. There are no negative beings which have attained the oversoul manifestation. So The word negative was cut out of the audio, but that's what was said. So no negative beings can reach the Oversoul manifestation, which is the honor duty of the mind-body-spirit complex totality of late sixth density, as you would term it in your time measurements. These negatively oriented mind-body-spirit complexes have a difficulty which to our knowledge has never been overcome, for after the sixth density graduation, wisdom is available, but must be matched with an equal amount of love. This love light is very, very difficult to achieve in unity when following the negative path. And during the earlier part of the sixth density, social complexes of the negative orientation will choose to release the potential and leap into the sixth density positive. Therefore, the Oversoul, which makes its understanding available to all who are ready for such aid, is toward the positive. However, the free will of the individual is paramount, and any guidance given by the higher self may be seen in either the positive or negative polarity, depending upon the choice of the mind-body-spirit complex. I feel like I got this part. Okay, so there cannot be any negative entities in the sixth density. Good to know. The assholes get vanquished at some point. Okay, because they have to match the wisdom and the love. And they can't match the love if they're a bunch of assholes. So if they decide to move up to the sixth density, they literally have to release all the negative crap. They have to release it all so that they can leap into the sixth density and immediately become positive, because they're matching their love and their wisdom. I like that. Okay. But because of free will, any mind-body-spirit complex can look at the guidance from the higher self and the mind-body-spirit complex, the mind-body-spirit complex totality, in a positive or negative way, and choose their path all the way up through fifth. But if they want to get to sixth, they have to be positive. All right. Then, using Himmler as an example, was his higher self at the time of his incarnate. He was incarnate in the 40s, a sixth density, positively oriented higher self. Correct. Isn't that some craziness? Was Himmler in any way in contact with his higher self at the time he was incarnate in the 40s? We remind you that the negative path is one of separation. What is the first separation? The self from the self. The one known as Himmler did not choose to use his abilities of will and polarization to seek guidance from any source, but its conscious drive, self-chosen in the life experience, and nourished his previous biases created in other lives. So he wasn't listening to any guidance from anywhere else. He just thought he knew everything based on what he was experiencing in that life and other lives. Well, let's say that Himmler, for instance, reaches sixth density negative at the beginnings of the sixth density negative. At this time, would it be the case that an entity would realize that his higher self is sixth density positively oriented, and for that reason make the jump from negative to positive orientation? Incorrect. The sixth density negative entity is extremely wise. It observes the spiritual entropy occurring due to the lack of ability to express the unity of sixth density. Thus, loving the Creator and realizing at some point that the Creator is not only self but other self is self, this entity consciously chooses an instantaneous energy reorientation so that it may continue its evolution. Instantaneously changes orientation. Okay. But now I have another question. There's always a question. For every answer, there's 10 more questions. Here's my next question. So if we have a mind-body-spirit complex totality that exists in the sixth density, when we actually get to the sixth density, what happens to that? If it's just a collection of information, of all the possibilities of that which we could get there. Is it not needed any longer? Do we meld together with it? What happens to it? Then the sixth density entity who has reached the point in positive orientation may choose to become what we call a wanderer and move back. I'm wondering if this ever occurs with a negatively oriented sixth density entity. Do any move back as wanderers? Good question, Don. Once the negatively polarized entity has reached a certain point in the wisdom density, it becomes extremely unlikely that it will choose to risk the forgetting, for this polarization is not selfless but selfish, and with wisdom realizes the jeopardy of such wandering. Occasionally a sixth density negative entity becomes a wanderer in an effort to continue to polarize toward the negative. This is extremely unusual. That makes sense. A wanderer comes back to help others, and a negatively oriented entity is not going to come back to help other people. But if they think they can get something out of it, then they would. But most of them don't. What is the mechanism that this unusual sixth density entity would wish to gain to polarize more negatively through the wandering? So asking about a sixth density negative that would want to come back. The wanderer has the potential of greatly accelerating the density whence it comes in its progress and evolution. This is due to the intensive life experiences and opportunities of the third density. So in the third density, we can have intense life experiences and opportunities to progress. Thusly, the positively oriented wanderer chooses to hazard the danger of forgetting in order to be of service to others by radiating love of others. If the forgetting is penetrated, the amount of catalyst in the third density will polarize the wanderer with much greater efficiency than shall be expected in the higher and more harmonious densities. Similarly, the negative-oriented wanderer chooses to hazard the forgetting in order that it might accelerate its progress and evolution in its own density by serving itself in third density by offering to other selves the opportunity to hear the information having to do with negative polarization. So yeah, a positive wanderer comes in because it has the opportunity to give love to others. And in the forgetting, in the third density, can polarize the wanderer with much greater efficiency than shall be expected in the higher, more harmonious densities. The negatively oriented wanderer is only wanting to share information for other people to move up negatively and to help themselves, of course. Yep. Are there any examples of a sixth density negative polarized wanderer in our historical past? This information could be harmful. We withhold it. Please attempt to view the entities about you as part of the creator. We can explain no further. So that tells me yes, there have been, but they don't want to tell us. And they're like, but just remember, we're all one. I was wondering if qualification for contact with Ra might include penetrating this forgetting process. Is this correct? Quite correct. So what did Dawn just ask? I was wondering if qualification for contact with Ra might include penetrating this forgetting process. What does that mean? Penetrating this forgetting process, like remembering, like knowing that you forget? Otherwise, the law of confusion would prohibit this, correct? Correct. Oh, yeah. You have to know that you forgot. In order to make contact with Ra, or probably any of these other entities, you have to know that you forgot. There has to be a conscious awareness that you forget. Otherwise, it would be breaking the law of free will. I was also wondering if 3 was the minimum number necessary for this type of working, of contacting Ra or other entities like that. For protection of this instrument, Carla, it is necessary in the minimum grouping, and also as the most efficient number due to the exceptional harmony of this group. In other groups, the number could be larger, but we have observed in this context that the most efficient support is given by the individual mind-body-spirit complexes present at this time. So there can be any combination of people or whatnot, but for Carla to contact Ra, she needs Don and Jim. Okay. Now we each have a separate or different higher self at the 6th density positive level, correct? Each of us in this room, the 3 of us. Firstly, it is correct that each in this dwelling place has one oversoul. However, due to the repeated harmonious interactions of this triad of entities, there may be seen to be a further harmonious interaction besides the 3 entities' higher selves. That is, each social memory complex has an oversoul of a type which is difficult to describe to you in words. In this group, there are 2 such social memory complex totalities blending their efforts with your higher selves at this time. So Don, Jim, and Carla have 2 social memory complex totalities that are helping also with their higher selves and with their mind-body-spirit complex totalities. So that's a whole nother can of worms. A social memory complex totality. Good God Almighty. Okay. Don says it's very difficult at times for us to even get a small percentage of understanding from some of these concepts because of our limitation of awareness here. I think some meditation on this communication today will help us in formulating questions about these concepts. Amen, Don. Amen. Okay. Last bit for this session. Thank goodness. Can you tell me what percentage of wanderers on Earth today have been successful in penetrating the memory block and becoming aware of who they are? And then finally, is there anything that we can do to make Carla more comfortable? All right. So this is very interesting. What percentage of wanderers know who they are? In the mind-body-spirit complex, remember who they are, really. We can approximate the percentage of those penetrating intelligently their status. This is between 8 and 1/2 and 9 3/4%. So of all the wanderers on Earth in 1981, only between 8 and 10%, less than 10%, know who they are. Totally. There's a larger percentile group of those who have a fairly well-defined symptomology indicating to them that they are not of this insanity. I don't know if that's the word Ra meant to say, but it's hilarious. Let's repeat. There's a larger percent of the wanderers who realize through symptomology that they are not of this insanity, suggesting that our 3rd dimensional Earth reality of social memory complex incarnations is insane. Accurate. Okay, this amounts to a bit over 50% of the remainder. So a bit over 50% of the remainder of this between 8, take out 8 to 10%. 50% of what's left know that there's something about themselves that makes them know that they're not from here. Nearly 1/3 of the remainder are aware that something about them is different. So a tiny little percent know exactly who they are. A big number of them know that they're definitely not from here. And some of them, 1/3 of the remainder, know that there's something different about themselves. So you see there are many gradations of awakening to the knowledge of being a wanderer. We may add that it is to the middle and first of these groups that this information will make sense. So, the people who know that they're not from here and the ones that know for sure who they are will understand this particular information. And maybe Ra is actually meaning that they will understand all of this information in this whole session, which, good God, I hope somebody does, because this one was by far the most difficult for me personally to try to wrap my head around. So let's review real quick. This video is already entirely too long. We learned about mind, body, spirit, complex totalities, and higher selves. Whether we really understood it or not is yet to be seen. We learned about negative sixth density, and we also learned about, or that there can't be negative sixth density. And then we learned about some wanderers. We learned a little bit more about wanderers. So it was really mostly talking about the mind, body, spirit, complex totality, and higher selves. I definitely need some help on this one, so let me know if you have any ideas about any of the stuff that was really, really confusing. I would love to hear your opinion about it. Or what kind of questions do you have about it? What kind of questions do you got? Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, give it a like. Subscribe if you haven't already. Go watch some more of these if you haven't seen them, because this is the most confusing one, and other ones are, I think, a little more easily manageable. And I'll see you soon for the next one. Bye-bye.